Peace, brothers. It has definitely been a long time, and I want to just thank everyone out there who have been rocking with me throughout this absence of me dropping a video. And I definitely want to acknowledge everybody out there for their continued support. Of course, on my blog, theesquireproject.com, which will always be dedicated to helping black men to eliminate barriers to personal achievement, as well as for the book that I released a little over a year ago, which is Designing the Unstoppable Black Man, a personal achievement guide for the everyday black man. It's available on Amazon. I've seen people talk about it on Twitter. I've seen people share things about it on Instagram, even though I don't use Instagram. And just in general, different spaces and different areas online, I've definitely seen support of that. And I'm just really grateful for any difference in any help that I can bring towards black men's self-improvement. So I definitely just want to take a moment to tell you, brothers, that I'm really glad to be back with you. I hope that life has been treating you good, that you've been in good spirits mentally, that you've been doing well physically as well. And there's a lot more work that has to be done. A lot of work that has to be done by me and by us collectively. And I also want to just make sure that, I acknowledge the people who have been fairly new to my work as well, because I've noticed some incremental channel growth that's been really steady. This channel has always been a smaller one, and we just hit over 1,000 subscribers recently. But even as I anticipate some growth that'll probably be taking place with different things I got going on, it's always going to be a channel that's meant to really serve a certain niche of black men when it comes to self-help, personal development, personal growth, things of that nature. So we got our own thing going over here, and I just want to make sure I let you all know that I definitely salute you, and I'm glad to be back with you. I thought it was only fitting, especially after a time period like this where it's been a minute, that we give some special attention to a very important series within my catalog, and that's A Message to the Love Deprived Black Man. Now, before we get started with this installment of our series, which is subtitled The Remedy, I want to give a brief overview of this series in general. So we began undertaking this issue, this vexation, and this depression that's experienced among a group of men who are coping with what we consider love deprivation, which is having a heart that's in a constant state of want, of female companionship, attention, physical affection, and ultimately a relationship. And this is just that natural or innate desire to have a woman's heart, a woman's soul, her loyalty, her exclusivity, her commitment, and her desire to maintain a deep, unbreakable bond with a man. And the love deprived black man longs to feel special and to have an attractive woman, a beautiful woman who brings him enthusiasm at the sight of her, and who clings to him and desires no other man. This is the image that the love deprived black man has observed among his family, his peers, strangers, and he, of course, wants the same for himself. And you see, as this man begins to have experiences with women where there is some sort of a romantic nuance, the love deprived black man is usually not the best decision maker with women, and that he'll typically put up with all types of situations in hopes to experience the possibility of some sort of relationship with her. So this means accepting unacceptable behaviors and tolerating unbecoming lifestyles of women whom shouldn't even be taken seriously by him. This includes being disrespected, being a person who's used and a person who knows as well that women are ultimately being selfish towards him, even though he'll just continue to give her more and more. This means having his feelings disregarded by her, being put on the back burner, not prioritized as someone who's in her life, devoting a lot of non-sexual attention, conversation, and dates, even if these dates are, even by her own words, just platonic outings. You're just friends. This means that this man often uses his money and gifts and also is just around in a woman's life a lot of times just to be an ego boost by solely or predominantly focusing on her. Now, the reason that this man is usually so wet behind the ears initially, and then even after having some experience, he'll still wear his heart on his sleeve is because for the past 20 something, the past 30 something, 40 something years, and even longer in some cases, this man has spent so much time in a state of what could be likened to as romantic solitary confinement. So falling in love easily, becoming attached to a woman, and even psychologically dependent upon a woman for his sense of well-being is something that he is highly susceptible to. And as follows, this is often met with having his emotions toyed with and experiencing the heartbreak of discovering that he's not the only one in her life or the only one who's on her mind. And this in turn makes the man oftentimes resent his own self for believing her and for believing in her. He has to deal with confusion surrounding her treachery, even when his intention was that of sincerity. And in many cases, he even considers terminating his own life over the pain, especially when it's experienced repeatedly and is deep enough. The love deprived black man attracts some of the worst type of women. His self-image is low, and he feels lesser than as a man because his esteem is often predicated on the non-existence, the absence or the irregularity of a resume of relationship experience and sexual encounters. And even when he does get experience, it's often met with unhealthy dynamics surrounding them. It's as if this man is just cursed with having no luck and having a good situation. Now, all of this aside, brothers, the love-deprived black man must come to a point where he accepts that his emotional management is even more important than what he has been missing from a woman. His interpretations of his experiences, whether partly actualized or just completely unmet, his capacity to train himself by being a student of himself through any and all experiences or any senses of connections that he's had, his activeness in crafting a well-rounded life, his wisdom in turning over his troubles to a source of universal intelligence that's greater than himself, and his acknowledgement that no woman can truly solve his problem are all components that largely will allow this man to regulate his emotions from getting the best of him and leading a life with more intent and contentment than constantly being in what seems as though it's a never-ending state of despondency, loneliness, and misery. And so that brings us to this fourth installment of the series, A Message to the Love-Deprived Black Man, The Remedy. Now, if you've been with me for any time, then you know that I have always focused on what a man can do for himself, irrespective of the circumstances. And this installment in this series is a reflection of such. It is much easier said than done to simply say that we can just think our way out of our innate desire for intimate emotional connections with women, a genuine sense of companionship with him, and outlets for mutual physical exchange, and also being the focus of her desires. These are things that you are likely to experience at some point in your life if you haven't already, and things that you'll also experience throughout your life to varying degrees, even if it's few far and in between. Whether these experiences are closer to your ideals or much lesser than the way that you want them to turn out and are actually troublesome for you. The purpose of this installment, the remedy, is for the love deprived black man to have a treatment plan for when his heart is in a state of duress and when he experiences emotional turmoil, when things aren't going favorable for him, which means his wants aren't being acknowledged, attended to, or met, whether he has expressed them or not, in which he must accept that his undesirable experiences is directly linked to something within himself that is not right. Yes, you see, his own personal problems, which have roots that are deeper than what he's dealing with when it comes to that woman or when it comes to those women, is what must be tackled. That is what must be assessed. That is what must be controlled. And it's something that he has to do by his own initiative. This means that while it takes the cooperation of a woman to give you what you want, that what you want has to be evaluated, brought to scrutiny, and judged. This is particularly for the love deprived man who has had pleasantries in his experiences, but constantly finds himself feeling malnourished of a woman's attention, affection, care, and concern for him, and interest in him. The reason is that the love deprived man is mostly an idealist, a hopeless romantic, a man who wants it to go the way that he wants it to go, a man who's prepared for the pleasure but not for the pain, a man who may know better but still entertains a woman whom he knows he shouldn't have anything to do with. This man will view himself as a victim for not having what he believes that he is due when he considers what he sees other people around him have. You see, he's accepted the marketing of what love, relationships, and companionship is supposed to look like and feel like. Now, brothers, did you think that you would get away with being told that it's her job or that it's their job to deliver on your ideas, or that it should be you whom she wants instead of him or them, or that because you sincerely mean well, that she should be open to giving it a chance, and that she should see you as being the good person that you are and acknowledge that you're what's best for her? And when it doesn't happen this way, that you owe yourself a woe is me orchestra of sadness. You don't know why people do the things that they do in life. You don't know what makes a woman the way that she is. You don't know why she makes certain decisions in her life that on paper don't make any sense to you. And you don't have any control over how she feels and when she feels it. Much like you don't control the ups and downs, the favorable and unfavorable conditions of the housing market, even though you need a place to live. You don't control when it's a buyer's market or when it's a seller's market. So you're trying to make sense of her senselessness, her contradictions, her hypocrisies, her changes in attitude, her absence of prioritization of you, and interest shown towards you when things were going so well, because you, like me, being an idealist, want to keep things smooth sailing, not acknowledging that when you had her at a good time that felt good to you, that was actually a bad time for another man who wanted that same experience with her that you had. But your habit of taking everything personal, it limits your viewpoint, and subsequently it limits your emotional capacity in dealing with and moving on from situations that aren't going the way that you want, the way that you think that they should ideally go, and are no longer healthy and serving you appropriately. I know that you hate an interruption of intimacy when a good vibe goes to waste or is given to another man in the middle of the unfinished business that you have with her. You see, your appetite for consuming ideal situations plays a large part in your interpretation of your love deprivation. And so hence we have the remedy. Now, what is a remedy? Well, a remedy in medicinal use is a treatment to address a problem. And the problem here is that love deprived men have a sickness, a serious disease in which his discontentment with not getting what he wants from a woman, specifically in the capacity and in the way in which he wants it, depreciates his life's value due to non-actualized romantic expectations, which he allows to handicap him from the gift of peace of mind. Yes, brothers, we do indeed need help. And when we need to recognize that this ailment is based largely on what we put into our minds, much like how many cancers are directly related to what one puts into their bodies. And the toxic chemicals that we're putting into our minds is this steady diet of mismanaged expectations. Now, what's the power of a remedy? Well, different remedies are used to do different things. Some remedies are meant to be curative, while others are meant to be preventatives. And yet we still have others that take away the symptoms of a problem so that the body can rest and heal itself. Now, as examples, if you had a slip and fall and you injured your back, it's very common for your doctor to refer you to go get some physical therapy, where a few times a week for a couple of months, you'll work with a therapist who has you do various stretches and various exercises, along with probably some heat and ice applications on your back. And all of this is meant to help you maintain or regain your normal mobility and to reduce pain and prevent further injury. Or as an example, if you have a cavity, a dentist often recommends treating the cavity by removing the decay within that tooth and filling it with the material that looks like a tooth, acts like a tooth, and feels like a tooth, so that you can chew like normal and retain your smile. But see, neither of these remedies stop anything from recurring, because you can still injure your back again and have a repeated or a new injury. And that same tooth that was fixed can decay even further, along with other teeth. So the only literal way to not have a back problem or a tooth problem would be if your spine and your teeth were non-existent. Then you couldn't have a back problem or a tooth problem, could you? But in like manner, if the emotions of sadness, anger, feeling betrayed by a woman, or being jealous of her heart, body, and attention going elsewhere were emotions that were forever removed from you, then you wouldn't have problems associated with those feelings. But since those emotions are within you, just like parts of your body are part of you, then we should take measures to manage the emotions, to plan for susceptibility of those emotions plaguing our quality of life, and also to make lifestyle changes as a defense against those emotions beating us. You see, this is a holistic approach in dealing with this element of love deprivation. for the men who no longer want to allow this ailment to take up any more time and space in their lives than it must, and to know that it is a matter that you can control. And a key part of this remedy plan is acceptance. So acceptance means accepting that you may live the rest of your life where no woman ever truly gives you what you want or what you think that you need from her. Part of this is just based on the reality that relationships all have expiration dates. Whether the separation is due to death, whether it's due to disinterest, changes in personal values, violations within the relationship, or mutual dissolvement due to growing apart. As mentioned earlier, the love deprived man often takes his feelings of malnourishment of a woman's affections, of her touch, and her bond with him as a personal thing, while not considering that when you look around at people in general, there are very few people who are with the original person whom they entered their first relationship with. People get married, they have children, and get divorced 20-something years later and start new families, and many times don't even have communication with their original spouse once those kids are grown, and wouldn't even barely know if the ex-husband or the ex-wife is still alive if it weren't for mutual acquaintances keeping them posted. And just think of the many women that you see and probably that you dealt with. They're not with the first man whom they had a child with, and they'll often go on to have multiple children with multiple men throughout multiple relationships. Most people are not still having sex with the first person whom they chose to lay down with, and this could likely be the case for yourself as well. See, people fall in love and out of love with others all the time. They can be highly attracted to someone one day, and then the next day, they can't even be paid to ever kiss that person or hold their hand due to a massive shift in the interaction. So it's wisest to simply understand that when your time comes to experience whatever degree of a connection, whatever degree of relationship, of physical exchange, that it's best to focus on the experience that you're having while you're having it. Enjoy the relationship for what it is and what it's worth while it's taking place. Don't bet so much on the unforeseen future, trying to forever make a way for everything to keep going as it has been going or as it once was, even when it seems like there's no legitimate reason for it to end. Definitely be involved in your experience and also acknowledge that even when it's over, that you had a woman who mutually participated in sharing part of herself with you to whatever extent that she did for however long it lasted, whether you had a good week, a good month, a few months, a year or more, whether this was a one-time thing, a few encounters or exchanges that took place, a periodic thing, or whether it was an ongoing relationship, where there was a fair and mutual social, sexual, or romantic dealing, you do have experience. So in reality, your deprivation is subjective. And again, experiences last for as long as they last and happen when they happen, and they come and go, which leaves the door open for you to have other experiences that can be just as fulfilling and even more fulfilling if you're open to them and not harping on reliving the past so much with any one particular woman. This principle of relationship changes happens in all areas of life, whether it's with your bank, your employer, the friends that you grew up with, etc. And so it also happens in marriages. It happens in long-term relationships. Whether explained or unexplained, whether it seems fair or unfair, whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, whether it's amicable separation or one party making the decision. At some point, things are going to come to an end. And it's not always about something being wrong with you. So I know it's hard because you're a hopeless romantic as well. But just accept that when it comes to women, all connections that you experience, all the good vibes, the great chemistry, her being cool people, you and her having that boyfriend and girlfriend experience, or whether you have casual encounters or friends with benefits, or you just trying to see where things can go and checking each other out. All those things are subject to change at any time. But be very self-aware about not internalizing it as a personal thing, especially when you know that you were a respectful, good dude and things just seem to fizzle out despite your efforts to maintain it. And here's another thing to consider. Even if you do have that title and the feelings that you want, you truly don't know what's really going on in that woman's head this whole time. Consider some of my earlier videos where I reference how I personally have had women who were in relationships come around me while they were dealing with their significant others, some of whom I really wanted to be with initially before they even got with these people. And throughout their relationships, they expressed to me their desires to still deal with me. So imagine if I were on the other side of the fence and was in relationships with them and they were telling another man that they still had feelings for him. You see, sometimes love deprived men are so disturbed by not having substantial formal relationship experience where it's recognized and public that you're with her and she's with you. But even in those relationships, you can easily get embarrassed and find yourself playing a fool. Because if that woman has any experience whatsoever with any man that she chose to participate in a sexual or romantic relationship with, there is a very good chance that she still entertains or is willing to entertain those past men. She still got some numbers. She still calls them her friends. She's still curious about that what if factor. Just like I referenced in a previous video about a woman who mentioned to me that even though she had a husband, she felt that her actual soulmate was a man whom she had known since her youth, that she actually never did anything with, never kissed him, no extensive hugs, anything like that. But she still felt more connected to this other man after many years of marriage. So it doesn't matter if it's one, if it's 8, or if it's 26 guys that she's dealt with. On the surface, you may be getting what you want, but you can never read her heart. And you cannot see the images that fill her mind or her thoughts surrounding men. You never know the secrets of her heart. It's important, brothers, that you really relieve yourself of this issue of always wanting to be the special one, of wanting to be that dude, the one that she's just crazy in love with, where she's always constantly on you. Because as authentic as that can be in that moment and up until that point, she can still feel the same way or greater about another. And likely she has already felt that way before you even came into the picture. Being her favorite is temporal. Don't rest your laurels on that, and don't lose your mind trying to keep up with fulfilling the criteria that it takes to be considered that in her eyes. Because what you're really doing is you're leaving a huge chunk of your self-worth under her control. And I'll add to that in my experience, I've had a lot of interactions throughout life with different women in different capacities. I can really look back and say that there is no woman whom I've been sociable with, no matter what her situation was, where I got the impression that she was truly inaccessible. Another important thing to do as part of your treatment, as part of this remedy, is to forgive yourself for times where you allowed yourself to be so short in your dealings with women. This means understanding and accepting that you're human and that you have desires and emotions that can get the best of you. You see, no matter how logical you are, no matter how practical you may be, that has very little, if anything, to do with your inclination to just want to go with the flow or what feels like the flow and have enriching experiences with women. And even when you know that she's being unfair or that you're giving much more than you're actually getting in return, or that you're being undermined and underappreciated, ripped off even in some way, and yet you still find yourself interested in her, curious about her, wondering why you want to try to keep finding ways to fix things or to make them better when it seems like you're in this fight all by yourself. And even when you know that you've compromised on your values and you've compromised your self-worth, your pride, and even your dignity. You have to learn to forgive yourself for that as well and understand that from time to time, this can still be a struggle throughout your life to get a handle on. When you really think about it, you could be living a horrible life, doing terrible things to people with little to no redeeming qualities or virtues about yourself. But that's likely not the case for you. But you have had moments of weakness with women, moments that you wish you could have gotten back many times due to trusting her and believing in the future possibilities of good things happening. And you let yourself down. During the global shutdown that we had, starting in 2020, many men found themselves really vulnerable, especially if these are men who lived alone and had no children, like a lot of you brothers out there. A lot of men were working from home or were actually out of work, not able to get out and about as much as in normal times, and just had completely inactive social lives. And some may have even been coping with physical illnesses during that time and just felt very isolated. And I personally know of people who found it to be too much during that time and found themselves doing things out of the ordinary just to be around people, just to literally be able to touch someone and have some social contact for that first year especially, and even into that second year. Just feeling so desperate to have someone around, just to know that they're not alone in the world. If this is you, and you look back especially at a time like that, probably a once in a lifetime sort of scenario, forgive yourself. You're not always going to live up to the standards that you set for yourself in all situations in life flawlessly. Even when you think that you're over the negatives of allowing a woman to have a bad impact on your life, as I have in times past, where for years at a time, I convinced myself that I was now immune to the negative effects that women can bring, all because I had not experienced them in a while and hadn't invested myself into anyone that deeply in a long time. The reality is that I was asymptomatic because when a certain woman came along, I went through arguably the most heartbreaking and longest lasting pain just when I thought that I had the game beat. So self-awareness and forgiving yourself is key. And that's why I recommend a holistic approach for the treatment of love deprivation, because you need to have multiple things working for you at the same time to deal with this. This love deprivation issue is not an isolated matter and is not just due to a deficit in attention, affection, and connection romantically. And when you try to treat it like it's just some isolated matter, it'll be like eating right without exercising and without getting enough rest, while also being stressed out all the time. So your body is not in an ideal condition to operate at its optimum if you're doing that, even if you're doing one thing exceptionally well. The results will typically be better when you have more than one thing going for you. It's like getting laid off from work and you're solely relying on unemployment benefits. If that's the case, you might be in for a very rough patch if that's your plan to sustain yourself. If you don't have some sort of an emergency fund or a savings, and if you're not also being assertive in the marketplace to look for a new job. If all you got is just that one tool, unemployment working for you, and if it comes later than expected, or if it doesn't come at all, then you'll be in for a rude awakening. So you need to have something to fall back on as a preventative, so to speak, mentally and emotionally, as a man who has experienced love deprivation for a large chunk of, if not the majority of his life. And you need something to heal and strengthen as well. And that means taking approaches to craft your life as an individual. Because when I relapsed, I can look back and say that it was because somewhere in the back of my mind, I convinced myself that because I was so busy and because I was producing certain results in my life, that it was preventing me from getting too close to anyone to even deal with this issue of being let down. I thought I didn't have time for heartbreak. And because I was also so much less tolerable of women's unacceptable behaviors, that it meant that I was well along the path of being over a lot of those former weaknesses. Working 60 plus hours a week, barely sleeping, hitting the gym, maintained a very regular sex life, all of that stuff inadvertently, and especially being that it was drama free in dealing with that part of my life sexually. But all that stuff was inadvertently covering over the fact that I had not taken the time to take that well-rounded approach to combating this issue of falling victim to the element of love deprivation, because I had no symptoms at that time in my life. But I discovered that I had work to do when getting involved with the wrong women at the right time. And the right time meaning that my life eventually got back into a state where it was easy to deal with the hell that a woman can bring and to start tolerating it again. I talk about in my book, as well as in previous videos, on the importance of crafting your life as a man and how it's so important to have things going for you that you can look forward to on a regular, like improving your financial situation by becoming fiscally sound through financial management, planning, and through accumulating savings, by honing in on getting a skill so you can actually establish a career, by also having a vocation which may even be separate from your actual career, something that's a true calling that means something to you that you feel dedicated towards, having real authentic hobbies that you're into and that bring enthusiasm to your life that you are excited about waking up to every day, and also on setting and hitting milestones or those once in a lifetime achievements that you can be proud of when you exit this place. In addition to being a student of different subjects so that you can be just a well-versed man and who can really contribute something within certain areas or topics and conversations, and perhaps even to expand within those arenas. Things that have nothing to do with being wrapped up in women. I also encourage to even take a personality test. My recommendation was the Myers-Briggs, but you have alternatives, you have different variations and even abridged versions of that test just to help you get a better understanding of how you generally operate as a personality type and how you process things. And this is psychological theory, taking these tests, but I find them to be very useful, and I would also encourage you to do the same, just to be used as a tool to get a better understanding of certain values and relationships of all sorts that you have. Being a student of self should be a very high priority in your life, just as important as getting nutrition throughout the day. So regularly study yourself and what makes you tick and why. And examine the feelings that you have throughout the day about different things, whether it comes to women or other things. But here, we're mostly focused on the impact of women, and particularly in the area of these close personal dynamics that you seek. So being a good student of self and of your emotional responses and triggers surrounding women is key within this remedy. And speaking of emotional awareness, one of the emotions that love deprived men usually struggle with as an Achilles heel throughout his life is getting a handle on his predisposition towards jealousy. Now, in committed relationships or even within explorative relationships, where you're dating in some capacity to see about the possibilities and you both mutually recognize that, it can be very common and even normal to feel a degree of jealousy about a woman's attention, interests, and affections being shared elsewhere, because there's usually some sort of, whether it's spoken or unspoken, understanding or maybe even expectation of some type of exclusivity around something, somewhere within that dynamic. And when someone feels as though that is violated to some capacity, or when there's some sort of suspicions that there's potential compromise of such, as in the case of a former lover lingering around, or if you're not comfortable with her being a flirt, or her retaining certain close friendships with exes, then those conversations need to be had, and you should definitely get to a place where there is an understanding and a respect that's there, that does not in any way feel like it's a struggle, where the two of you can decide to either pursue things further or to just dissolve things. You should be able to clearly communicate your concerns and come to an understanding. And if one is not arrived at, and if there's no solution in sight, it's usually wise to not continue any further, even if it's based on your own insecurity, because neither of you will be satisfied and happy dealing with each other. But the sort of jealousy I'm going to focus on is the sort of jealousy that exists within love deprived men, which is more reactive, in that this jealousy can exist even when you're interested in a woman, but is not understood to be a mutual pursuit of such interest, and you become jealous of her interactions and behaviors with other men. Now, this type of jealousy is different from the other type, where some sort of relationship is taking place, whether it's serious, whether it's non-committal or casual, where you're more concerned with there being an interference of something that has already been established or already gotten started. This other reactive jealousy is what one experiences when he has social, sexual, or romantic interest in a woman, but he isn't getting the attention that he wants and feels insecure about her sharing that elsewhere. It's the type of jealousy that comes from feeling like you're not being recognized, and it bothers you because you want to be a part of this woman's life and you want her to be a part of yours, but it seems as though there's no room for you or there's no strong interest in you. Now, this can take place with women whom you have brief interactions with, or even have had some sort of significant time spent with them, maybe even a co-ed setting. But the thing is, you're wanting her to read your mind and to see your qualities and be naturally drawn to you. And when this doesn't happen and you see that she's passionate, sexual, social, or interested in other men, it can really disturb you to no avail, because she's actually the object of your desires and she may not even know it. And really, this type of jealousy is a sophomoric thing, but it is a real thing that love deprived men struggle with, especially when the woman is very attractive. And I believe that this is partly due to the late blooming of most love deprived men, where they didn't really have experiences in their youth with young, beautiful women, let's say around 13, 14, 15 years old, and throughout high school, or even during those early to mid 20 college type years. And they haven't really had the type of women that they really wanted aesthetically either. At least not in any form of abundance. So when these women are around, they want to have that experience of what it's like just to be welcome and involved in these women's lives, especially when she's young and in her physical prime. And when this doesn't happen, you'll feel like you're missing out. And it reinforces those same letdowns that you experienced in your youth. So you begin to ask questions like, why can't I be the one that she sees value in and appreciates and wants to deal with and hang out with? See, these types of things, they go through your mind, sometimes even stronger as you get older into your late 20s, your 30s, and even into your 40s, because you've had so many years where you haven't really had that before. You never really had that type of experience with women that you wanted with those young, beautiful, attractive women. And social media doesn't do you any favors either, because these type of women often broadcast their dealings and interactions with men and the joys that they're experiencing from the guys that they're really into, and the very colorful, socially active lives that they seem to lead. And this also leaves room for you to observe the flood of attention from other guys who are in competition for her attention as well. And it makes it even more of a struggle to deal with. So you ask yourself other questions like, why is she choosing to do what she's doing with them, but not with me? Why am I not good enough? Why is it that when we hung out that time, she seemed kind of shy, but when it comes to these other dudes, she's all up in their face and more into them? What's wrong with me? Why am I not important enough? Why am I not a priority? Why am I not somebody who's worth getting to know? And a lot of times you'll be cool with just being part of this woman's life just because you want the door to be open for her to see your good qualities one day, and maybe even leaving all this other male attention aside and doing what you believe is best for her by letting you lead and teach and protect her. This fear of loss of something promising or possible with this woman, your life's state of general loneliness that you experience outside of her, the interferences that you sense from her entertaining other men's attention, and her literal engagement with other men instead of you, ultimately the absence of her attention, all contribute to your low self-esteem. And part of the remedy is actually lessening this reactive jealousy that has been a loyal companion to you throughout your life, always present, just as sure as a limb is present. But you'll also have to fight against not wanting to be jealous, because this emotion is so familiar to you that you actually view it as part of who you are, instead of it being a disempowering habit that you've let have its way throughout your life. Yes, if you're really going to be honest with yourself, in some way, you're actually deep down inside proud to be jealous. It's what makes you feel human. And it is also what makes you feel connected to a particular woman who you experience this with, because you secretly think that your jealousy will be sensed or noticed by her, and that this will make you significant in some way when she sees that you care, and that you're affected by her. And even when she never knows that you feel this way, the jealous feelings still make you feel like you're connected to her, even if you're in this thing all by yourself. It's like the love deprived man is addicted to pain, viewing himself as being the protagonist in an R&B video. And this jealousy issue can happen with almost any woman. But love deprived men are particularly susceptible, much more than other men, in experiencing this with women who frequent nightclubs, the IG models, the strippers, the women who offer sexual and sensual services where they entertain men, because these women often have a high amount of sex appeal. They look good and they demonstrate a level of comfort with physical expression. and access to physical engagement. So it's not uncommon for the love deprived man to fall for these type of women and try to change them or steer them away from their lifestyles or to save them from it and ride off into the sunset of a new life together, putting the past behind them. So be very self-aware when you exit your home and when you go to that club or when you're looking at your social media feed. Be very self-aware with the women that you're following online, because all those things can arouse feelings of jealousy within you. And you really have to be honest enough with yourself to recognize that about yourself, and also to use discernment in feeding your mind more disturbing thoughts by being obsessed with these women's actions. Now, I want to bring you to the final part of the remedy, which I call the 4 states of care for love deprived men. What I mean by states of care is that these are types of experiences that love deprived men can give attention to in an empowering way in overcoming their debilitation of love deprivation. Now, these states are not meant to be abused or misused. Rather, they give realistic options for men to reduce the emotional burdens of letdowns with less than idealistic dealings with women, and are used in addition to the parts of the treatment that we went over earlier. The first state is disengagement from women. What this means is not giving any serious attention to women, whether it be sexually, socially, or romantically, for a defined period of time, or until a level of self-awareness and self-control is reached that allows a man to eventually deal with women in a healthier way, irrespective of the outcomes that he has with women. Now, this is a vital state to be in that I would say that all love-deprived men should employ at some point, because it gives him time to focus on himself. It gives him the room and space to develop core strength within his spirit to get connected either spiritually, religiously, intellectually, or philosophically to a set of ideals and principles that he can adopt, and allows him to develop resiliency, self-reliance, and healing from traumatic experiences with women. Sometimes a man deliberately chooses this state, and other times it can seem as though it's chosen for him as a reaction that comes on the heels of a bad experience or aggregation of bad experiences that have finally taken its toll on him. Now, when it's done under the latter circumstance, a man can convince himself that he's making a firm and even final decision to not put himself in situations where he can experience pain and disappointment again. But he's usually fooling himself by being distant from the deeper personal problems that had a role in getting him there and confronting those issues that were under his control, and then choosing a new outlook, a new attitude, and set of behaviors moving forward that are all well crafted, sustainable, sensible, and true to him. But when used with consideration, this state of making that separation from women for a time period, it can be a beautiful time for a man to get back to being himself, or to discover what that really means for the first time moving forward. See, this is a time where he can do much self-reflection and discovery by reading books around his noticeable weaknesses and areas in which he needs help, and practicing an updated version of himself, and by being prayerful and meditative. And it's also a good time, if necessary, to go talk to someone professionally, or a trusted friend for that matter, and to be able to take in the philosophies of other men who have went through similar things, whether it be through online or offline communities, and see what parts of their ideas can be useful to him. Sometimes it's just one sentence that can set the tone for a new way of looking at things. In this state of the disengagement, it's also a great state to be in when you just need to take a little bit of time away to get out of town, take a break, go spend some time in nature for a few days, and to get your life organized and repurposed. So these states, they're not in any sort of an ascending order, but that's the first one that we've addressed. The next state is what I call having the upper hand with women. Now, despite the name of this state, it's something that requires careful consideration and responsibility both towards yourself and to women. So within this state, you are in more control of the influence that a woman has in your life because you're being sociable and casual with women who exhibit the strongest interest in you. What this basically means is where you see fit entertaining the women who are choosing you and mutually enjoying each other's company, whether it be casual outings or if you decide to share in some form of responsible physical exchange, but where you know that your company is much appreciated by her. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. This does not at all mean using women to feel better about yourself or just hanging out with women whom you really don't even want to be around or who you don't even find attractive, just to have somebody around or to boost your ego. Rather, it means recognizing that she's the one predominantly in pursuit of spending time, and she recognizes your qualities and attributes, and where you know that you like to entertain that with care while being confident that you can control your emotions from the beginning and throughout the interaction. So this state allows you to truly enjoy a woman's good company and to show her a good time and to give her the good experience of your personality. But it's also very important to make sure that you're not being inconsiderate of these women's feelings because you don't want to be misleading. You don't want to be stringing anyone along, as likely something like this has been done to you in the past, and you know what that feels like. Rather, you want to actually be transparent and let them know that you do date and that you do like spending time with them, but that you're looking to keep it casual and occasional, to have a date maybe for a concert or a movie, go get dinner sometimes. And if anything happens along the way where either one of you feels stronger about the other, that you'll keep each other posted and communicated about that and be considerate of each other's opinions, which will be more so you being considerate of her. And when you think her agreements don't match her emotional expressions, you have to delicately but sometimes firmly make certain decisions on how things should be moving forward so that no one gets hurt. And what's interesting with these women is that over time, you might even notice that these women can be assets in general and that you can include them even further into your life's affairs if it's healthy for the both of you to do that. But you always got to be fair. And if anything, you should be the one who's prepared to handle taking an L, so to speak, if it means letting her spread her wings and moving on, because you don't want to be intentionally hurtful or deceptive with these women. And do not rest on an ego boost of her being into you, because just like in any other case, this type of woman can also change in her views towards you. And eventually, if she feels as though the interest that she's getting isn't in proportion to her output, then she will also move on from you, just like in any other situation. And you really never know why this woman might be so drawn to you anyway. It could be that she just thinks you're an amazing man. It could also be that she's rebounded from another situation. But the point of this stage is that the advantage for you is the emotional control part, where you know that you can walk away with relative comfort. Or if she walks away, you won't be thrown off because of your decision from the beginning to enjoy the positives while maintaining the self-awareness that you're managing any emotions that you have throughout the experience with relative ease. And this is also a good state to be in, where you can just enjoy women socially, such as women that you meet at lounges, bars, small businesses, networking events, where you can have exchanges in passing that don't have to end with any particular outcome other than you giving them something to smile about and them doing the same for you and being satisfied with no further expectations. Now, this next phase is one that I'm going to say with an asterisk because it's something to give some careful consideration to. But that's the phase or the state of fetishizing and objectifying your experiences with certain women. And I'm going to keep this simple. And I say it with an asterisk because I'd only suggest considering this when you're keenly aware of yourself and when you know that you can keep things in a specific place mentally. So what this means is safely and responsibly only focusing on the erotic and the sensual gratification that a woman can bring you. Just keeping things straight up in a constant state of pleasure. When you're around her or think of her or you think of them, instead of feeling warmth in your heart, you should only be feeling warmth in your pants. And when you take this path, keep it distant and very much so surface. Do not spend time outside of the subject at hand with these women. Don't try to learn about their personal views on significant subjects. You don't even want to know too much about them at all. And in some cases, you won't even need to know their real names. And you shouldn't even be inclined to want to share yours unless you just like hearing her say it. The entire exchange should be an oasis from your normal reality. So whatever it is that you like, that she's down to entertain, the focus should strictly be on that. And as soon as you find yourself caring about parts of these women's personal lives or being curious beyond what the pleasure that they can bring, I'm telling you already that you've gone too far. It should be easy if you never hear from these women again and that you look at every single interaction as just a case-by-case scenario. If they disappeared or if you disappeared, you should be satisfied just with the memories enough. And I don't think you need my help with finding these types of situations that I'm talking about. But the usefulness of this state to you is that these women are outlets of stress relief and add some periodic joy. And your biggest caution outside of the possibility of getting personal with these women is letting their entertainment become an addiction to you, which is its own matter. So I say that this is a phase for love deprived men to proceed with caution in. But when you know you got things under control, which may mean avoiding some whom you can actually see yourself falling for and choosing the myriad of other options out there instead, then you can actually consider not being so cautious that you defeat the purpose of actually enjoying yourself. Now, the fourth state is that of cultivating a relationship. I'm not going to give you a how-to guide on being in a relationship. Each man must be responsible for his own choices. And you know me well enough to know that my style is to offer principles and frameworks more than anything to give brothers to operate from within, as I believe that everybody who's listening to me has the capacity to think for himself and make his own decisions. Now, I can give you a host of qualities to consider when you scoping out a woman, such as how selfless she is, how trustworthy she is, how much of a suitable mother you think she'll be to your children, how willing she is to make sacrifices for the strength of the relationship, and dozens of other attributes to consider. But instead, I'll leave you with just a thought. If you're looking to start a serious long-term committed relationship with the woman who's for you, when that time is right, you should be able to confidently and comfortably have faith that even though you know for a fact that things are not going to go exactly as you want them to go, that it would be worse to not build a relationship with this woman than to fear what can go wrong by building a relationship with her. My brothers, this is a message to the Love Deprived Black Man, Part 4, The Remedy. It's good to be back with you all once again. The real work starts with you. It starts when you turn this off. I know that in videos like this, where they're lengthy, that we can be inclined to just enjoy hearing the voice. But it actually takes putting these things into practice, giving considerations. And I definitely want to encourage you to look at all 4 parts of the series and to go over them as needed. And just to know that you're not by yourself in this thing. And as I mentioned before, when I drop my content, it's really a journal to myself that I'm sharing with the brothers. Until next time, it's peace and love.